Hi, I'm Jack. I'm here with my guest, Allie. Say hi, Allie.
Hi.
And today we're going to be talking about education reform. All right, Allie, you ready to talk about education reform?
Of course.
You sure?
Yeah.
You don't sound sure. I think I have a string of guests that are very unsure.
Mm-hmm.
With what they're talking about.
Well, at this point, I'm not really sure what even is education reform.
That was a really cheeky segue into our first section. What is education reform? That was a horribly cheesy way to start talking about it. But we can. So education reform, generally, is any sort of policy or types of policy that would affect education and would work to, I guess, reform. It's pretty much in the name. It's any policy that really affects students' learning or that works to make students' learning more effective.
Okay. So, what are some main types of education reform?
One really notable example that any person in the United States probably is aware of is the No Child Left Behind from earlier 2000s, which, even if people aren't directly familiar with, people recognize the name. And the whole point of that was basically to make sure that kids weren't being swept under by the system.
Yeah.
Pretty much in the name.
Which is very important.
Yeah, that's a big part of education reform is people want to make sure that the standards of education are high, but that every single kid, gets the best opportunity to learn that he can.
Yeah, and they're all equal.
Yeah. And that's a lot of the work that's gone into education reform is just making sure, or is trying to make sure that the students can get the best learning experience. And this is a pretty unpartisan issue. I think regardless of what political party you may be affiliated with, most people care in some way about education reform.
Yeah,
education. Whether or not it's actually about the students or tax money, but people still care.
Education is the future of society. It's really important that we secure our future through these kids. That's what I'm meaning.
Yeah. It's pretty nice. I like living in a world without stupid people, and that's why school's nice.
Yeah, exactly.
My mouth is absolutely dry. It's horribly dry. We were breaking a rule where we're not supposed to stop talking. Of course, I can edit this out, but...
A little rebellious.
Rebellious?
Yeah.
Okay. So we talked a bit about education reform. One big part of when people refer to education reform, and I would be surprised if this is a bulk of what we talk about, might be standardized testing, which is something people absolutely love to have strong opinions about.
Yeah. Well, what's your opinion on it?
I'd rather not say.
What do you mean?
Well, I don't know if I necessarily have a strong opinion over it. I see both sides of the argument. I'm not saying that I necessarily am full in one way or the other.
Yes. I feel like it's unfair to students, especially students with disabilities who, testing anxiety, just the pressure that's put on all of these standardized testing, like ACT, SAT, it determines our future for most kids.
Yeah, that's definitely one big part of why people kind of tend to dislike standardized testing. And then on the other side of the coin, just opposite from the fact that not all kids are great at testing, is the fact that it's a very convenient way of comparing kids and just seeing where education is at.
Yes, I
even
can
though it's
see
not
that.
applicable to all kids, it's just a good way to kind of generalize, which is important because if we're looking at large groups of people and gathering information, it's kind of easier to do something that's a standard across the board rather than looking at individual anything.
Yeah, but
vary from students.
I feel like with that knowledge, teachers are teaching according to the test, not to the future and what kids actually need to learn by that.
No, that's very interesting. And that's actually one of the arguments against it is, teachers believe that this is something limiting and that allows them to have less control over what they're teaching if they have to teach for a certain thing or if they teach for certain guidelines, which actually, part of that is, or one of the things we're going to talk about next is Common Core, which I'm sure you also know about. Anybody that's been in the public school system, I'm sure, has heard, just in general, I'm sure people have heard of Common Core.
Yes, yes.
Which is another thing that people, I guess I should probably talk about what they are before we really go into what people think about them. And these are basically standards that are required in, I believe it's 48 states. I'm going to throw a number out there and hope it's right. 48 states, I believe, are held to them. And it's basically means that they're taking Common Core is basically looking at where they believe students should be at the end of a given year. Mm-hmm. And basically looking to see if students are up to that par, and then, if they're not.
Yeah.
And this is something a lot of people, for the same reason, like teaching to the test, as you said, a lot of people aren't necessarily fond of, is because they feel like this limits what teachers can teach. And then on the other side of that coin is people could argue for the fact that, well, we need a sort of standardized thing. Or standardized
we need guidelines.
Yeah, guidelines, just a general thing, so that way we don't have, like, kids in Kansas learning one thing and then,
yes,
kids in Maine learning an entirely different thing.
I can understand that, but I feel like there's a boundary that some are crossing with this.
What do you mean?
Okay, like, they cross the boundary whenever that's all they teach towards is the test. And, like, I mean, even finals, just, like, in your class that don't go to the state, like, teachers are just teaching for that. They're not, like, teaching for lifelong lessons.
This is, even outside of things like, Common Core and just general standardized testing, you think that teachers are already teaching towards a test. So
yes.
You think this is already a problem that's just being perpetuated by
and
perhaps?
I mean, I feel as though teachers shouldn't teach towards the test, but towards our future. Like, what happens when we go out of college? There's, like, you don't even use half of the math that we've learned.
Oh, so now you're speaking just generally of what we learn.
Yeah, I feel like teachers should teach according to lifelong lessons rather than the test. And we can even... So
just a general overhaul in general of what they're teaching at schools. That's pretty interesting, and I have heard a lot of stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It's definitely a concern that some people have. And I mean, it's a pretty practical concern, I think. It's a pretty decent thing to be worried about, because education undoubtedly is useful to have.
Yes, I agree.
I love public ed. I love that I'm not living in a world where, little Kevin is 18 and now he can vote and he didn't have to sit through a history class in his life.
Yeah, I mean...
Because that would horrify me.
Yes, yes.
Sorry if your name is Kevin and you haven't sit through a history class in your entire life. I'm not trying to judge you, Kev.
Oh my gosh. Well, and, like, lack of education is proven to correlate with poverty levels.
Yeah, that's another important thing. Is to reduce poverty, education is always useful. And then in areas that are highly impoverished, there's, less graduation and more people going back into poverty, which is never nice.
I mean, again, education is our future. We need to really stabilize it and make sure it's the best that we can have. And
that's the big concern over it. Everybody has strong opinions about this because everybody knows it matters. Mm-hmm. Which I suppose is, great that everybody has strong opinions about it, but because it is important, but, equally negative because everybody has super strong opinions about it and they're unwilling to listen to other people.
Yeah, yeah.
It just causes more conflict.
It's a vicious cycle.
Yeah, it really is. Because it's almost contradictory. It's great that people have strong opinions about it. However, it's almost detrimental in certain ways. We're going to take a short break and we'll be right back. Alright, we're back, and we're going to be continuing talking about education reform.
So excited.
It's very exciting. Not as exciting as volcanoes.
Debatable.
I think that'll be a general consensus. I think volcanoes are more exciting than education reform, which again, I think part of the reason this isn't as exciting is mostly just because it's something that people argue over. You people that might argue for, might argue in favor of standardized testing, people that might be more against standardized testing. And it's just, generally, it's harder to have fun talking about something that is more divisive.
Yeah, I can agree with that.
So let's just move on right away. You wanted to talk about required courses, correct?
Yes. I mean, everyone knows that through elementary school to high school, we're required to take math.
Even earlier in
yes.
college.
Yeah. We are required to take math, history, English, and science credit.
Yeah, these are generally pretty standard courses that you have.
General education. And so the debate is on whether those are necessary, or as we get older into our last years of high school, can we maybe drop a history and take a cooking class or something for our future?
Yeah, so this is a pretty, I think, again, divisive subject, because there are general things that are pretty helpful for people to know.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think, I'll say I'm probably on the side of having people take courses that are probably less specific to what they want to do, and just sticking with general, broad education.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think those are things that are just generally useful. Whether or not you actually know you're applying them, knowing them, I think really doesn't hurt you.
Yeah.
Like, maybe learning more advanced maths than you might use seems unpractical, but that might help you have a better understanding of the basic maths you use every day.
Mm-hmm.
Or, having a chemistry class might help you whenever you're putting out a kitchen fire someday. It's just these things that are generally a good wealth of knowledge that you have in your bank, just in general.
Yeah. But I mean, is that a good trade-off for something that is specifically created to help you with, like, taxes and things?
No, you're right.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like a balanced argument, because each side has good points. And, history is something that I'm not a big fan of. Like, I'm not going to major anything close to history, but it's important that we learn about our mistakes of the past so we don't repeat them in the future.
Yeah,
it's just things like that, which it's like, I feel as though we need these, but even if we could just get these subjects more specialized to our major, if that makes any sense. Like,
I get what you're saying, that even if you had to take these general courses, maybe having one just more specialized to where you want to apply yourself, or in ways that might be more
and that would be helpful,
yeah.
Like pre-college, so you could see, is this the way I want to go? So when you go into college, you could know the classes that you want to take, hopefully, or have a better idea of it.
Well, I'm going to say part of general, like, sort of education is the expanse you sort of get brought in to, like, these subjects that you may not have previously had any sort of knowledge or interest in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
for instance, if you take a chemistry course, like you're, like one of the later years in high school, and you're like, whoa, this is great. I had no clue I love chemistry so much. I'm going to be a chemist.
Yeah,
that's an experience you might not have had if previously you thought, oh, I'm just going to go major in, and then, something entirely different.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point, but I feel like that student in that situation maybe wouldn't have an idea of where to go. Like, and if someone knows what they want to do, then I feel like we should give them the privilege to go and explore that. But if someone doesn't have an idea and takes that chemistry class and loves it, then that's the education system doing their job.
Well, I do think we currently offer, like, certain courses that people can take that are more specialized to what they're doing in high school, just with electives and stuff. And obviously that will depend on where you live and what high school you attended, and all sorts of things like that, because it's different based on where you are in the nation. Mm-hmm. Especially if you're in, like, an impoverished area, then you're less likely to have more classes, because less people there get to graduate. Mm-hmm. Like, in certain schools in Washington, D.C., I think they were thinking about lowering the standard for actually what you need to graduate.
Yes,
Just because they had such a low graduation rate. Mm-hmm. But what do you think about that? Just moving on to the almost different subject. Do you think that they should do that? Do you think it's good that they should adjust the standards?
Not
or
at
do you
all.
think, what's your idea for this?
I mean, I feel like
such low rates of graduation.
Yeah, I feel like everyone in the United States should be held at the same level of success. And
Like the same
once
level for their education.
Yes, and once we lower one, then everything is going to be uneven, and automatically kids who go to Washington D.C. Schools
Some schools
go to.
That was just an example.
Okay. Yeah, we'll say it wasn't Washington.
Tie all of D.C. to the.
No, okay, sorry. Well, if they were going to that school, they're automatically at a lower advantage than their peers.
But that's already the
from
case
another
because
state.
schools that tend to have more impoverished students receive less funding, which
Well,
is just due to things like
yes.
the suburbs and. I mean, we both grew up in a school system which
was debatably the best in the state.
I don't remember that. It was a public school system that was near the suburbs and not near an urban area, and received just way more funding than our counterparts that went to
I feel
the closest urban area.
And that's unfair. Like going back to teaching to the test, the higher the test scores, the more money we get. That's not equal. I don't agree with that at all.
That's another thing. Yeah, I forgot to mention that earlier. Is that there was? I'm not actually sure. I didn't follow up entirely with this, but there was a period of time where people had talked about teachers being held responsible for the learning that their students have done, and whether or not that's apparent on a test.
Exactly, and I can understand that pressure in a teacher's. In a teacher's standpoint.
Yeah, sort of encouraging a teacher to do well and not slack off.
Mm-hmm.
But then again, if you have a teacher with students who, either don't apply themselves or have some sort of, difficulty taking tests or just anything to that extent,
mm-hmm.
you have to what level is the teacher still responsible?
Yeah, exactly. And I don't feel like they should be having that pressure on them in the first place.
Yeah,
providing, I feel every school should get the same amount of money.
That's definitely, yeah.
I don't understand why that's not happening.
Well, I think a lot of it is this is tied to, in American history, whenever a lot of traditionally white families moved to more suburban areas,
mm-hmm.
and even whenever they were going to cities, it's just leftover sort of. What would happen is more funds would tend to get sent to schools that had more white students, just
mm-hmm.
traditionally, than ones that have more students of minority.
Yeah, which I would understand that in the past, but we're in the future now.
But the thing is, what happened is, whenever suburbs became a thing, it was just systematically easier for white families due to redlining, which, for the listening audience, I highly recommend you look into, because it's a very interesting and kind of ugly part of our history, but something you should probably know about regardless, and we won't go into enough depth here. But they made it harder for, certain families that were of a minority to get housing in suburbs, and they made it easier for families that were Caucasian to get access to these. And what happened is that means they have a lot of people, usually Caucasian, that would commute into a city for work, mm-hmm. and then they're living out in the suburbs, and there's a school where all the white kids are going. And then in the city, they have a school where it's mostly, kids of minority and color. And they're going there, and that school's receiving less funding. Yeah. Because they live in an area where there's less people that are high income. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't move out of there to go to a place with better income. So they have poor education. Mm-hmm. So it's repeating the cycle.
Mm-hmm. And if we cut that and made all of our budgets and wages equal for every school system, I feel like the rich schools would realize how other schools are at such a disadvantage, and we would fix it. They're hiding behind a curtain right now. They're not seeing the whole picture of how schools are suffering, and even going back to lowering their requirements. That we shouldn't lower.
I agree. It's in a tricky situation because we have students that are in school that want to go on with their lives, but due to the scenario around them, they haven't been provided with the necessities to succeed. And then there are students that have, ample funding at their schools that can, succeed whether or not they actually have to apply themselves, while certain kids can just,
Yeah, I mean, it's just another vicious, it's a vicious cycle again in the educational system. We just need to get the willpower to cut these off and fix our problems.
I mean, that's part of the root of, reform, is that, people see sort of injustice in the system and they want it corrected. They want, students to learn the same stuff and have the same opportunities.
Yeah.
And it's just the difficulty in what ways we think we should go about experiencing that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, Allie, I think that's all of our time for today. Thank you so much for joining me.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
It was a lot of fun.
Bye. Thanks for listening.
Bye.